good afternoon. And again, my name is Ofer Ben-Amots. You can hear from my accent, you can hear that I am originally from Israel. Even though I've been living in this country for almost 35 years, I've been very successful in keeping my Israeli accent, which works against me at times when people don't understand. So if you have a problem understanding me, just don't hesitate to mention it, and I'll try to explain it in a different way using other words, maybe. So I've been living in Colorado Springs, here in Colorado since 1994, and I've been teaching music at Colorado College for the last 27 years. I have two grown-up boys that one of them was born here, one of them was born in Philadelphia, and they are wonderful. And my subjects at the college are music composition, music theory, but among other subjects, I also teach about Jewish music, the history of Jewish music. And that's what I'd like to talk to you about today, Jewish music in general, and then a little bit about my own music, which is, I consider it to be Jewish music as much as possible. So if I asked you now, what is Jewish music? Everybody say, oh, that's so simple. Yeah, like I'll get different answers. Hava Nagila is Jewish music. Yes, we know that. A synagogue chanting is Jewish music. Hasidic nigunim, the tunes of the Hasidim, this is Jewish music. Maybe we even go in to talk about George Gershwin, Rhapsody in Blue, or about Aaron Copland, or about Leonard Bernstein, or Irving Berlin, or all the dozens and dozens of Jewish composers who created American music, not only Jewish music. Is their music Jewish? So it's a very interesting kind of question. What is Jewish music? And you know, many of you probably have visited the synagogues on your communities. How many people are you familiar with the prayer Aleinu? Oh, good. Aleinu leshabeach ladon hakol laten gdula. All the services, whether it's a shacharit, the morning service, afternoon service, evening service, holiday, not holiday, they all end with Aleinu. Aleinu is a very, very serious commitment to God. We recognize that He's the only one for us, Jewish people, and we are committed. So actually, originally, Aleinu was a very unique prayer that was only said on Yom Kippur. Did you know that? Before it became a daily prayer. It was only said on Yom Kippur with bowing all the way down to earth. Until today, people do it sometimes in the synagogue. They go all the way down in front of the ark. But it became a daily conclusion to the prayer, Aleinu. But when we go to the synagogue and we see good Jewish people, very respectable lawyers and doctors and people who are very, very serious about their life, and then they start singing, and yourself, wait a second, what are they singing? Itsy bitsy spider went out the water spout. Wait a second, is this Jewish music? That's what you expect to do in the prayer? And then they say, and they conclude, Bayom Mahu, yeah, da, da, da. The farmer in the dale, the farmer in the dale. Hey, yo, that's Jewish music? Why would we all do something like that? So these are the questions that comes when we have to ask, what is Jewish music? And then we reflect back and we realize that the entire subject of Jewish music cannot be taken for granted. The existence of Jewish music by itself is a miracle. And let me explain what I mean by a miracle. When we read the Hebrew Bible, the Tanakh, we can see that we can read that musical life in ancient Israel, in the temple, in both temples, was very vivid, very complex. They had choirs. The choirs sang the Psalms. They sang some prayers, but mostly the Psalms. They were standing on the stairs of the temple. Actually, we have the evidence that they were switching every 2 hours, but they were singing about 22 out of 24 hours of every day, including Shabbat. There was no rest for singing. And they were playing instruments, and there were orchestras, and there were soloists who were singing, and they had conductors. So the life of musical life in ancient Israel, especially in the time of the two temples, was very rich and full. When we say two temples, we have to talk about 1,000 years. That's way more than the existence of the United States, if we want. 1,000 years, that's about 450 for the first temple and almost 600 for the second temple after they came back from Babylon. And we have the evidence through the Bible and through the Talmud and through the Mishnah that there was a lot of music there. However, with the destruction of the second temple, which was in the year 70 to our common era, the rabbis of the Sanhedrin, that rabbinical court of 70 rabbis, gave a decree that there will be no more music as part of the service. No more instrumental music is allowed as part of the sacred service. The only thing that they allowed would be the voice of the cantor. Cantor would stand there as the emissary of the congregation, because you go to the synagogue to talk to the king of kings. You need an emissary, you need somebody to represent you. And that cantor would be allowed to sing and improvise. There's an entire art called the nusach, and this developed over many, many years. But we would say that for the last 2,000 years, that was the music that the Orthodox, by the way, the Orthodox communities until now do not allow for instrumental music. So if you go to a synagogue and you have a rabbi who is a cantor who is also standing with a guitar and there's a cello playing on Yom Kippur, this is not Orthodox. This would be either Reform or Conservative or Conservadox or whatever other tradition that is, but definitely not the Orthodox. And so, while other religions, let's take, for example, Christianity, where music is so central to the service, in fact, the most beautiful music of our Western culture, Bach and Mozart and Beethoven and all the great names, they were commissioned by the church to create masses and requiems and cantatas and some great, great music that we all love. But for Jews, this was a big no-no, no instrumental music until the third temple is going to be built. And so why? Because we are all in a state of mourning over the loss of our central sacred service place, and we cannot just make music. However, there were two occasions that even the greatest rabbi could not forbid upon music. And one is the Purim. Everybody knows what Purim is, the holiday of Purim, where you're allowed to do many things. Even they say a man can dress like a woman, cross-dress, women can dress like men, and you have costumes. at the Purim, music was allowed. And in fact, there was an entire tradition that's called the Purim Spiel, where the book of Esther, the scroll of Esther, is reenacted in the form of a play with Haman and with the king Achashverosh, and with Mordechai and Esther, and music was indeed allowed. Not that it was allowed, but it could not be forbidden, which means in Jewish language, it is allowed. And the other occasion is the Jewish wedding. And that's not just a one day in the year. This is an occasion that appears part of the life cycle. And even the greatest, most pious rabbis, and even 70 rabbis get together and decide no music. You could not forbid the music in the Jewish wedding because it is a mitzvah from the Torah to make the bride and groom happy on that day. And how can you make the bride and groom happy without offering music? Music and dance and that. So now you understand when I say that the existence of Jewish music was hanging on a thread. It's one holiday and Jewish weddings, and from that developed all what we know today in terms of Jewish music, so that today we can talk openly about Jewish music. And the biggest example is, for example, Fiddler on the Roof. Fiddler on the Roof, such a great movie with all the songs that everybody knows, and that epitomizes what Jewish music is all about, especially the Eastern European one. Yeah. So this is a little overview about the history of Jewish music. But to say that when we talk, I mean, when I say we, that's mainly scholars who deal with the research of Jewish music. We talk about cantorial music of the synagogue, the art of chanting, like what we call the nusach, because the chanting is not only the melodies that we know, but it's also the art of improvising. You know that some of the days, whether it's Shabbat or holiday, it can be very, very long. And the cantor needs to know how to improvise and to feel the congregation. If the congregation gets a little impatient, let's say they're very hungry on Yom Kippur, he needs to move on. He cannot start, turning his voice over and over again. He needs to move on. Neila, and that's the bagels are waiting. And so, and on Shabbat, he needs to do a little more relaxed. But during the weekdays, I'm talking about those who go to the synagogue during weekdays, he needs to be very quick. People need to go to work. They wake up early to be in the minyan, and they need to move. The Chazan needs to know how to, the tempo and the speed of the prayer is very important. So cantorial music by itself is a field of research, very interesting. Then there is the folk songs. And the folk songs, whether these are, I'm talking now about Eastern European Jews or Ladino, those who came from Spain, folk songs usually were carried by the women, by the mothers, by the daughters, not so much by men. Men would deal more with the synagogue song, but these are the women who sang the lullabies, who sang the love songs, who were sitting at home and dreaming of better life. These are the folk songs. This is a very interesting area. So that's area number 2. Then we have the area that's called Klezmer music. And Klezmer music developed straight after the Jewish wedding. Klezmer, the word klezmer that we use today, we say Klezmer music. Klezmer is a combination of 2 Hebrew words, kli and zemer. Zemer is a tune or a song, and kli is a vessel or an instrument. So an instrument of song, that's actually the player himself or herself nowadays, yes? So that's the klezmer. And the kind of music that they create, klezmer music, is just simply the Jewish wedding music, But it turned to be nowadays all by itself, kind of a genre that people loved. I love it, and I compose a lot of klezmer music. And the last one is Hasidic Nigunim. The Hasidic Nigunim is a very, Nigunim again is tunes or melodies. In Hebrew, Nigun is a melody, but Hasidism that was established in the mid-18th century by the Rabbi Baal Shem Tov, Rabbi Israel Baal Shem Tov, that maintained that the song is the key to opening heaven. So God listens better to our prayers if they are sung with a melody. Just spoken doesn't make it. It's too boring for him, but for her, sorry. But if it comes with a song, with a nigun, God can listen to the heart. It doesn't even need to listen. So that's why most of the Hasidic nigunim are oi oi oi, boy boy boy, oi doi moi 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 moi, and that's a nonsense syllable. They don't even need to use any words, because this is by itself a prayer. So these main categories, the four categories, cantorial, folk music, klezmer, and Hasidic, that constitutes the basis to Jewish music. And then that's about it. I teach that a lot at Colorado College, and to my surprise, I get every 2 years, I get full classes. People are really, really interested in that. Well, how did I get to be interested in this topic? Well, first of all, I'm a musician, I'm a composer. But when I left Israel, this was not long after my military service. You know, I started serving a few days before my 18th birthday, and that was the Yom Kippur War. I was supposed to be going to the music academy and be a pianist. I had very gentle fingers and gentle soul. But then the war started, and they say, hey, we need you in the tanks. Here, good American tanks. Send me to the Sinai Desert, and that's where I spent 3 years. And I could forget about playing piano but I didn't forget about studying music. So when I came out of the military at about 21, first I had to recover, to sleep for 2 years. So I learned how to tune pianos, and I did all kinds of things. But I started also composing. And after a year at the Tel Aviv University, I got a scholarship to go to Geneva. So I moved to Europe. I studied in Geneva for a year, and then from there, Geneva was very beautiful. Many of you may know it's the city of chocolates and cuckoo clocks. But I felt that I don't study this in the seriousness I was looking for, real music. And then across the border from Switzerland, there was Germany, and everybody was busy working there. It's a very industrial country, and I decided I'm going there, and I stayed 7 years in Germany. But in Germany, I had a chance to learn German. And it's a beautiful language, but moreover, it opened the way for me to understand Yiddish. Because you take the 95% German and the 5% Hebrew, and with the Israeli accent that I have, everybody said, you're speaking Yiddish. So just to say, I'm Sephardic. I'm Sephardic from origin. What is to me an Yiddish? My parents were devastated when they heard me talk German. But anyway, I stumbled in Germany upon a book, an old book of Yiddish songs. And I thought, my God, I didn't know about the United States. I had never been in the United States. I didn't know that people speak Yiddish somewhere else. I thought I'm there saving the Yiddish language by arranging those Yiddish songs. That naively, my thoughts were then. And I took those songs and I arranged them and made a cycle called shtetl songs for piano and voice. And I really thought that I'm on a mission here to save the world, to save Yiddish language that's dying. Everybody was talking about the Yiddish language is dying, of course. Shortly after, Isaac Bashevis Singer got his Nobel Prize in Yiddish. And then he said that the death of Yiddish language, the news of the death of English language are too early. It's not happening. He got his Nobel Prize for Yiddish literature. And of course, a great, great writer that I wrote my first opera on the story of Isaac Bashevis Singer called Fool's Paradise. Anyway, I thought that now I'll play for you a couple of songs from the Yiddish culture because they are just absolutely beautiful. These are not my tunes. These are traditional tunes. My contribution is in arranging them. And so let me see if I can play. Okay. So here's a song called Rolls Royce. And this is actually an interesting song, just like the Itty Bitty Spider that I was talking about. Jews in every generation were borrowing from the surrounding. They were borrowing music of the surrounding. The Hasidim had a wonderful explanation to that. They say all music originated in the temple and spread into exile, just like the people of Israel. So actually it is okay for Jewish people to use the melodies that are out there, used even by Gentiles. There's nothing wrong with it. And they have the Hasidic story about this pious Jew that walks in the forest, and he hears this beautiful, beautiful longing melody sung by a young boy shepherd who is with his flock of herd of goats outside there, or in the mountains. And he said, "Can I buy this melody from you?" And he gives him 2 Groschen, what we say, 2 cents. And the boy is saying, yes, the melody is yours. And now the boy forgot the melody. He cannot sing it anymore. Now this Jew is taking the melody and putting words onto it. But here is a song, Rolls Royce, which tells, "Rose, rose, how far are you? Forest, forest, how vast are you?" And then the answer is, if the rose wouldn't be so far, the forest would not be so vast. And the second strophe is, Shechine, God, God, how far are you? Golus, exile, how long are you? If God would not be so far, the exile would not be so long. So it became a metaphor. The original Rolls Royce is the original Gentile song, but then the Chassid is taking it and turning it into the Shekhinah, the feminine emanation of God, along with the Galus. So here is, let's see. Okay, so this is one example out of the shtetl songs of the shtetl, the little Jewish village. There are 9 of them, and that's what I did as a student in Germany. And then I came to the United States, and I was just surprised, even devastated. The moment, wow, so many people here understand Yiddish, and there is such a great Eastern European community. And so I felt I have to continue with my work. So I decided to delve into other languages. And one of the languages that I wanted to deal with was also, let's see, the Ladino language. So coming myself from a Sephardic house, my mother is from Bulgaria, and that's in the Balkan, and they spoke Ladino. Ladino is Judeo-Spanish. They spoke Ladino at home. This is a very different culture, but there is something that is still similar between the two cultures. Same thing, I just wanted to preserve some old Jewish melody, because as you know, the Ladino culture goes back to Spain before the expulsion of the Jews from Spain in 1492. Many people know that for 800 years, there was a beautiful Jewish community there, thriving community, people like Maimonides, the Rambam, the Ramban, Yehuda Levi, great rabbis that were there and created all this Jewish thought. But there was also the culture. Most of the culture was adopted from the surrounding Spanish. So the Jews like to take the melodies, beautiful melodies of the Romancero, and fit them with Jewish text. For example, there would be a love song, but this love song would turn later into Grace After the Meal. Or it would be preserved as a love song, but would get a new meaning. Now the love is between God and Israel, and so on. And my goal was to preserve all those things. And how do you preserve old music? Because if you just write it down, the melody, okay, so people would be able to maintain it, but then they would move on to computers and all the pages would be lost, so there would be a fire. The only way to preserve a culture is by renewal. That is something that one of the great philosophers of Zionism named Echad Ha'am, one of the people, he created the cultural Zionism and said, people can survive, and we know the Jews have survived for thousands of years, by renewing their culture, by revitalizing it. What is the secret of the Jewish people in moving forward? They didn't just take the Hebrew Bible and said, that is the book and nothing else. Then they created the Mishnah, and the Mishnah, they created the Talmud. And what is the Talmud? It's a bunch of discussions, bunch of this discourse between different rabbis. One said, I'm right, you are wrong. And I said, no, I'm right, you are wrong. And that this discussion kept the culture going. And so in order to maintain also a musical culture, it's important to take these old melodies and bring them into new light. But also sometimes to actually create some original songs in the style that we are talking about. I'm going to play for you, because we don't have much time, but I'm going to play just one song, which is not an arrangement, but it's written in the style of Ladino-speaking people. The text was written by a Ladino poet in Israel, and she is a Ladino speaker from Italy, and she wrote this beautiful poem about herself going back to see the town of her childhood, city of her childhood, Ciudad de Michiquez. And she's going back to the neighborhood where she grew up, and she's looking for the stuff that she knows. She's looking at the stores, and the baker is not there anymore. And there was a chocolate factory, and it's not there anymore. And she's roaming the streets, and she can imagine her parents, mother and father, standing in the window and calling her to come home for dinner. She has all these memories, very nostalgic. And then she stumbles into the bar, the bistro, in the corner of the road, and they ask her, what are you looking for, lady? Mrs., what are you looking for? She says, oh, I'm looking for my childhood, that it's no more there. And so I love this poem, and I saw it's so nostalgic. And I created it also, the melody, to be in a kind of a nostalgic Chopinesque way. So let's listen to it. This is now in the Ladino language.
Ciudad Michiquez, vini a tua parte, Ciudad Michiquez, torni a ti, callejas conocidas, olvidadas, entriami en metro, yo vini aquí. En el lugar que rollo mi casa, amigos y vecinos no están más, a mí solo mirando la ventana. Me pareció de ver papá y mamá. La fábrica de dulce está cerrada, el panadero pan no hace más. Color siento de pan y chocolate, sabor de mi chiquez al paladar. Solo la mañana está linda, abierta, ya estoy borracha mismo sin entrar. Señora, ¿cuál lo buscas? Me demandan. Yo busco mi chiquez, que El tiempo se quedó ay para mí, ciudad amicis vini a tu parte, ciudad amicis torni a ti. Recuerdos tanto dulces y queridos, el tiempo se quedó ay para mí, ciudad de mi chiques, vine a tu parte. Ciudad de mi chiques, torni a ti.
Okay, so generally my goal has been to take Jewish music and bring it to the art music stage. In many ways, if we think about what Gershwin did, what did he do? He took jazz from New York, this beautiful music, and put it on the stage in the form of Rhapsody in Blue, American in Paris, Porgy and Bess as an opera, introducing the white public to this gorgeous music. You know that putting Porgy and Bess was a scandal. Do you know how many people were against that? How can you put Black people showing their family, their love, their feelings? What is that? This was a very gutsy thing on the part of Gershwin to do, but he did it. Actually, before Porgy and Bess, he wanted to write the opera on the Dybbuk, the one that I'm going to play in a few minutes. Luckily, he didn't do that, because if he would have done that, nobody else would be able to write on this anymore. He's the best composer that America ever had. And what did Copland do? Aaron Copland took the American country music, the American West, and put it on stage. Appalachian Spring, Billy the Kid, all those ballets that he created, did the same thing. I wanted to take the synagogue music and created some sort of art music with it and put it on stage. Unfortunately, we don't have much time to portray a lot of it, but I wanted to move on and just move to the opera, the Dybbuk. And who knows from you, maybe the story of the Dybbuk, if you can raise your hand, because you probably know some of it. So the Dybbuk has been composed at least 30 times. As Bernstein has a ballet on the Dybbuk. Shortly after the Dybbuk was created by S. Ansky. S. Ansky was the person who wrote the play, The Dybbuk. And he was an ethnographer who traveled among Jewish communities and wanted to learn about Hasidic life in the Ukraine. And instead of writing an ethnographic study, he decided to take all the story that he had and combine them into one big theater piece called the Dybbuk. And at the beginning, he wrote it in Russian. And it was actually, at that time, not performed in Russian. He met with Chaim Nachman Bialik, the great Jewish Hebrew poet. And Bialik said, let's translate it to Yiddish. So the first performances were in Yiddish in Vilnius. And then the new theater troupe was established in Moscow called Habima, the stage, Habima. And he said, let's do it in Hebrew. And they created this piece of drama that's called the Dybbuk. We all know that the English people and the Irish people and the Spanish people, they have great playwrights. And Shakespeare wrote dozens of plays. And every other culture, they have plays. Jews have one play. It's called the Dybbuk, but they keep, like the Talmud, they keep rolling it over and over, and every time there's a new interpretation. So I did my own interpretation. That's a long story that I'm not going to get how I got to do it. But at any rate, to make a long story short, the Dybbuk is sort of a Romeo and Juliet meet the Exorcist. So the girl that falls in love with, girl Leah falls in love with Hanan, but then she's from a rich family and he's poor, and she cannot marry him because her father forces her to marry somebody else, and the Hanan dies. He studies Kabbalah all night and doesn't eat and doesn't drink and just study and try to change the order of the world, and then he dies. And in the midst of the wedding, she's calling his spirit to come back to her and save her. And of course, what he does, he goes into her body, and from that moment on, she is possessed. And so I described that. What I did, we don't have time to see it. Maybe somebody has seen it because it was performed in Denver at the JCC in 2008. That's like, That's like quite a while ago. But it was very, very successful production. At any rate, I tell the story, I changed the libretto, I changed the story to be all told from the side of Leah. I didn't want to tell it because Leah, she's the main character, but because she's in an Orthodox community, she cannot really express herself. She cannot express her feelings. So I did everything from her point of view. And then I turned Hanan, the lover that dies, because he's dead, he's a ghost. I decided that he would be a clarinet and not a real singer. So the entire opera is a chamber opera where the voice, soprano, and the clarinet, they are together. And then there's, of course, the rabbi, and there's a choir. So what I want to do is to share the screen again and show you, maybe we have enough time for a little bit maybe of the wedding scene. And then we move. Can you see the screen? So this is the wedding scene. That's from a production in Pittsburgh. And we'll see just some of it and then move on to see the exorcism, the end of the exorcism scene, which is, the famous one that's like, Dybbuk, come out. The rabbi is screaming, Dybbuk, come out. And then the Dybbuk says, no, I will not come out. And all this interaction and struggle. And at the end, the rabbi say, I will excommunicate you from the people of Israel. And then the Dybbuk gives up and say, okay, I'm coming out. And at that moment, of course, Leah has to decide if she goes back to life or goes together with a deceased lover. And she decided, the Jewish happy end, she decides to die so that they can celebrate on the other side. So here is the wedding scene, and it's called Nigun of the Seven Circles. In the wedding, where the bride circles 7 times around the bridegroom, and we'll see. So the bridegroom is the one that she really doesn't want to marry. They made it here as a puppet. It was very funny, actually. So.
Kala, kala, שמות כמתים אמנם שבות אל הארץ, אבל לא בלי דמות הגוף. יש נשמה אחת מתגלגלת דרך כמה גופים, אשר אביב את כולם. ויש נשמה נידחת שלא תמצא לה מנוחה. נכנסת בגוף חי כיין דיבוק, ועל ידי כך המוצאת את תיקונה.
והנה החופה הובילוני כאלמנה שוממה עם איש זר.
Okay, that's just a snippet of the wedding where at the end she screams, "Go away, you murderers." She doesn't want to get married, and then they understand all that she is quite ill. That's the way that they perceive the entrance of the Dybbuk into her body. Now I want to just show another clip here from the end where she's talking to the rabbi, and he's kind of threatening.
אשתדל בכל כוחי לתקן אותך ולגרש מעליך את כל החשדים וכמחבלים הסובבים אותך.
אינני מתיירא מפני החרמות והקללות, ובהבטחותיך איני מאמין. גם אין מקום לי בעולם, כי יקום תור זה ופנוח, כי תינוק מחי קימה. אל תגרשוני ואל תשפיעוני, הדרכים נסגרו בידי, כל השערים ננעלו בפניי, ועתה העומדים גם אתם לגרשני מן המקום הזה.
כל התצא מן הבתולה,
לא אצא.
בשם אלוהי העולם אני משביעתה בפעם האחרונה, שתצא מן הבתולה לאהבת חנה. ואם לא תשמע בקולי, הטיל עליך כרם, ואל תקד בידי מלאכי העולם.
בשם אלוהי העולם, הריני דבוק ומדובק בבת זוגי, איני פריד ממנו לעולם.
הזמן שנתתי לך כלה, התצא מן הבתולה לאהבת חנה מרצון. דיבוק, הואיל ולא קיבלת את גזרתי, הריני מוסר אותך לרשותם של כוחות העליונים. ואינו כן באוהב הגדול, באוהבך הגיע.
אל תגרשוני, לא אצא.
Okay, I think we're up with the time, so I'm kind of shortening it a little bit. But as you see, it's going on for in a while. She'll give up. She's a great Israeli singer named Yali Toren. She plays both Leah and the Dybbuk, and she does a great job on that.